We're good?
Yeah, you're good. You can
Just
start. It's
about.
okay.
Okay. I'm going to call the Norwalk meeting to order. And attending this are myself, David Westmoreland, and Mary Peniston, as well as Brian Bedoli and Katie O'Neill and Eugenia. And I'm not going to try the last name. um, First, is there any public participation out there? None? All right, then we'll go on to administration. That'll be first item 4A is the approval of the minutes of October 8th, 2024 special meeting. I'll move that. Um, Anybody have any findings, changes, deletions, additions? No changes? Not seeing any. All in favor of approving those minutes? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. Um, we'll move on to item 4B, the financials. And item number 1 is to approve the Norwalk Housing Corporation Statement of Revenues and Expenditures and balance sheets for all funds for year-to-date September 30th, 2024. You're on, Eugenia.
Thank you. For the year-to-date September 30th period, the Norwalk Operating Fund had revenues of $2,400 and expenses of $300, which resulted in a net operating surplus of $2,100. The balance sheet for this fund has assets of $765,000, liabilities of $371,000, and net assets of $394,000. The Norwalk Revolving Loan Fund, $450, had an operating surplus of $160. Not much activity there. This fund has total assets of $123,000 and total liabilities and net assets of $123,000.
That it?
Yes.
All right. Any questions? Seeing none, I'll call for approval of the statement of revenues and expenditures for September 30th, 2024. All in favor? Aye. David? Oh, I got a thumbs up from Mary. David's unanimous. We'll move on to the financials, item 2. Approved Norwalk Housing Corporation audited financial statements for fiscal year ended June 30th, 2024. And I'll turn that over to you, Michael.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening to all the board members and to Brian and Eugenia. I'm always appreciative of being involved, and I want to thank you all for your help and assistance, and make this short and sweet as I usually do, and so you can get on to other things. This is the June 30, 24 audit of Norwalk. It is our typical clean opinion, as we call it. There are no findings or material misstatements or significant deficiencies, our language that we use, that we would have to report to you. The one major thing I want to talk about here, I've already kind of talked to Brian and Eugenia during the audit, was just the nature of the fact that there is an audit for Norwalk. And since I have been around for a while, I wanted to refresh my memory and all of our collective memories as to what is really driving the requirement, because just to kind of go over it, this is unlike the redevelopment agency. This is a 501c3 entity, okay? So the audit requirements here are different than they are for municipalities or for governmental entities like NRA. So I think, Brian, is it fair to say it was somewhat unclear? That is there still an audit requirement for Norwalk? Because under Connecticut charities regulations, which have changed dramatically in the last couple of years, Norwalk probably wouldn't need an audit. So that's one thing I wanted to just kind of go over with the board, and doesn't have to be figured out today, since we're in the process of doing the audit. And I guess my understanding was that there might have been some requirement put on by the city or some other third party to have an annual audit, but there isn't really a lot of activity these days. And that's kind of why I brought it up to Brian as, if it's not necessary, why spend your money, kind of thing.
Isn't
You
the
bring up
rule,
an,
I thought it was like 500,000 in income, you had to do an audit. If it's less
Yeah,
than that,
that's changed, David. So now, effective this year, the 500,000 you're referring to of gross receipts, if a nonprofit had more than 500,000, it's
Yeah.
now $1 million.
oh wow, that's great. It
Yeah,
helps me on some other nonprofits.
yeah, yeah. So now from 500,000, this is what the law change was. Under 500,000, you don't need to do anything. 500,000 to $1 million of gross receipts. And just so you know, gross receipts by definition does not include government, municipal, or federal grants. So it would be just non-federal or state monies. From 500,000 to $1 million, you would only need a review level financial statement, not an audit. Over $1 million will be an audit. So it does kind of beg the question if this is not a requirement. I think at a minimum, maybe you could have a review if you so desire. But if you just look at the numbers from this year, if this was just a standalone 501c3 without being related, let's say, to a governmental entity, it would not be required to have an audit under Connecticut statutes.
okay, there are two things now on the table. I suggest we take a vote on approving the financial statements for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2024, and then I'll make a motion to stop the audit. So all in favor of approving those, the audited financial statements? Aye, that's unanimous. So that clears that up. I too am in favor of not doing the audit if we don't need it. So I'll make a motion to, what shall I say? Eliminate the audit on,
Can I ask a question, John?
sure, go right ahead.
What does the review entail, and I assume it's a lot cheaper than the audit?
Very good question. The answer is yes. In a review engagement, now, presumably, you're asking for a review engagement, even though based on the 24 audited numbers, you will not even need a review. Okay.
It's only for over $500,000. Okay, got it. Mhm.
Right. But let's just say, for sake of argument, in 25, it was over $500,000, or as a board, you decided you wanted to have something, and that something happened to be a review. I don't have my engagement letter in front of me, but it's something like 6,000, I think we were charging for the audit. Primarily because while we're doing NRA, the same kind of controls are in place. It does lead to some efficiencies from our standpoint on an audit. If this was a standalone audit, the fee would be more. But a review engagement, given the same framework, if we were doing a review engagement along with the NRA audit, I would say you're probably talking somewhere in the $3,000 to $4,000 range for a review.
And I'm sorry, Mike, I didn't hear what the number was for the audit. Could you say?
Well, I think it's around six or seven.
Six
it's
or
around
seven,
6 to
yeah.
7,000, just for the Norwalk audit. Just because in an audit, as you know, there's a lot of testing that has to be done. Now, there's not a lot of testing here because there's not a lot of activity, but the same number of checklists and documentation we have to go through is virtually the same as with NRA. It's just the nature of the beast in an audit engagement. So that's kind of why I brought it up. And I just guess always thought, maybe because back in the day this was represented to us, that it was a requirement along with the NRA audit. Now, back in those days, there was enough activity. Back in the days of, as David mentioned, the 500,000, it was probably many of those years were over that level anyways, but.
Any other questions?
The only thing I was trying to get at, I know it's like not a lot of money, but I was just wondering if there was any good reason to have some level of transparency. I mean, people can still get the financials even if they're not audited, right? Because it's public information. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Enough questions.
I can amend my motion to say that, well, we'll end the audit in favor of a review, and we'll look at the review in a year or two and see if we want to suspend that as well. So,
Yeah, it was really just, I just wanted to make sure you had the relevant information to make an informed decision.
okay,
And there could be some third party, you know, requirement hovering around out there that maybe none of us are really aware of at this point. And maybe there wasn't one to begin with, so.
given the law doesn't require us to do it, I would be in favor of not doing it and just doing a review and, and saving $3,000 approximately.
I would be in favor of not doing anything and saving taxpayers' money, all of it.
Okay. Mary?
As long as the public has access to the financials, I'm fine.
Suspending it all.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll modify my amendment. But I make a motion to suspend the audit and review until further notice. Do I have a second?
Second,
All in favor?
I
Unanimous. Okay. That ends. Is there any other business, new business, old business? We don't have to go into executive session. So is there a motion to adjourn the Norwalk meeting?
So moved.
So moved. All in favor? Aye. The Norwalk meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Moving on to Norwalk Redevelopment. Call it to order. Katie, is there anyone out there wanting to make comment? No public participation?
There is not.
Okay.
Nope. There's no one from the public here.
Seeing none, move on to item number 4A, US DOT Innovative Finance and Asset Concession Grant. This is to authorize the Executive Director of Norwalk Redevelopment Agency to execute any and all documents related to US DOT Innovative Finance and Asset Concession Grant Program. And Ryan, it's up to you.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, if you want, I could actually speak to both items of business because they're both related, if that's okay.
Okay, so I'll move A and B.
Yeah, okay, great. All right, so tonight, what we're specifically looking at is to provide authorization to enter to the grant agreements for the grants we received through the US DOT. The first grant, as referenced, is for the MLK Community Reconnection Project, and the second one in reference is the RAISE, MLK Corridor Equitable Mobility Enhancement Program that we received through RAISE. So on the first one, we received $750,000 through the Community Reconnection Project. To take a look at this area, can you all see my screen right now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So basically what's in question there is that area in yellow. So that's the money that is being allocated to fund just planning and conceptual design work for roadway improvements, sort of at the intersection here at Route 7 and going down past 95, around Matthews Park, and then sort of terminating in South Norwalk. And that is for us to take a look at and examine the sort of historical implications of what happened in the development pattern and in the community through the construction of Interstate 95. So basically what the grant program sought to do was to try to find ways to help reconnect different parts of the whole country that have been impacted by large infrastructure investments such as 95. So we proposed a project in that regard, and that will basically be to look at the current design of the roadway, try to find a consistent cross section, mainly for streetscapes and improve pedestrian connections in that regard. The second component of this is more of a capital infrastructure investment project, and it's related to the $14 million raise grant that we received. And the scope of those improvements are to extend all the way from basically effectively north of Webster Lot, all the way down to Wilson Avenue. And that will be a complete reconfiguration or sort of revisioning of the MLK corridor. That's been sort of a big focal point of discussions from a number of our plans that we were able to secure these federal resources for. That includes work that is occurring around the train station. We were able to use the sort of capital dollars that we received from the State Department of Economic and Community Development to provide match for this entire project. So it's sort of an innovative financing plan that we pulled together to leverage the $6 million, actually $9 million we were able to receive around the South Norwalk train station and credit that as match for the $14 million. I sort of equated, catch the small fish to get the bigger one. And I guess with the raise grant, the fourth time was the charm. We submitted this 4 times and we were successful. So it's, we're excited to get the project going, but in order to do so and to advance this work and secure the funding, we need to finalize and obtain approvals tonight for me to sign the actual grant agreement documents for both grants.
Any questions?
I was just wondering on the language was really broad because it said any and all documents related to it. Could we make it for executing it rather than any and all documents?
You can do that. We've made decisions in the past not to do that because it becomes quite problematic trying to implement these grants.
So what would be getting approved besides you're having the authorization to be able to do all the stuff to execute the grants?
Effectively procurement, contracting, things related to this grant. It's what we've done. This has been the precedent for all the grants. If you want somebody to change that, it's up to you guys, of course.
No, I just wanted to clarify because I just was wondering why it was so blanket, but and could you just give like a 1-minute overview of what that 14 million is going to be invested in?
Yeah, so the first component of the 14 million is going to go towards, probably 10-15% towards design and engineering of the whole sort of facility. Us working and securing a designer, making sure, taking a look at conducting a survey, working with the community. There's going to be a community involvement process. It's going to also require federal NEPA environmental review, so that's going to go towards that as well. And then it's going to be design and engineering of the entire roadway improvement, up to 100% drawings, development of construction drawing sets, and then bidding out and investing in the actual streetscape work. However, that ultimately gets defined through the design process.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, no problem.
What might the design include? Just
So
widening
what we
the road?
propose in the grant, it's effectively taking a look at, opportunities to give it effectively a road diet. There's a lot of obviously traffic that comes through the MLK corridor. And what we wanted to do is really optimize it in line with the city's, developing complete streets policy. So taking a look at, the right size for lane widths, taking a look at opportunities to improve the median, improve pedestrian safety along the corridor is a big component of this, improve connections to the train station. So I think, in practical terms, you're talking about sort of, lane optimization, sidewalks, and bike lanes. Basically, what we're trying to create is a whole urban boulevard concept. And that's what was sort of proposed within the concept of the grant.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other? Go ahead.
Brian, 2 things. Unfortunately, I know more than I about Crescent Street.
Yeah.
And whenever you start, you might want to touch base with me. When I was on the historical commission and they were building the mall, we considered with the mall expanding the choke point at Crescent Street. I don't know if you know all this, and I won't go into too much detail, but it narrows. There's a choke point where it has to be 1 lane. And we looked at expanding that and making it 2 lane by going into the cemetery a little bit. And so we had the state archaeologists do ground penetrating radar, and we did find burials in that area, and not only in that area, we did find burials basically sticking out from underneath the road. So we know that people are buried under Crescent Street, which makes it problematic for expanding it. We did look at alternate locations to move those burials to within the cemetery. There was some public outcry from the usual suspects in town. So we decided to leave it alone and see what happened, because we were mainly worried about mall traffic. But since they built the mall and they put in all the lights on West Avenue, it's actually been better than it was before there was a mall there. So we never picked it up again, but that's there, and that might need to be looked at again and considered. The second piece of that is, you may recall, the redevelopment agency jointly funded master site plan with the historical commission for Matthews Park. And we put that on hold because we were waiting to see if the city acquired 6 Butler Street, which they're finally doing. So that needs to be picked up again and finished. But one of the major things that we're going to propose as well is that when you go under the freeway on Crescent Street, it goes from the 1-lane choke point to being like 300 feet wide, and we could easily put in parking there, like striped angled parking on both sides, and really add a lot of parking for events such as the Nice Festival and when there's overflow in Matthews Park. So anyway, I'm just making you aware of this so that whenever that project gets started, you can come back around and get more information.
Yeah, that's actually super helpful. So I'll make a note of that. We don't obviously want to reinvent the wheel on any of these items, so
Yeah.
we'll take it.
Okay, that's it. Thanks.
No, any other questions? Comments? I'll call for a vote on items A and B. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Unanimous. We'll move on to new business, old business. Okay, we do have administration approve the minutes of the October 8th, 2024 regular meeting. Anyone have any changes?
No.
No? All in favor of approving those minutes?
Aye.
Unanimous. Going on to item number B, approve the Norwalk Redevelopment Agency revenues, expenditures, and balance sheet for the year to date through September 30th, 2024. And I'll turn it over to you, Eugenia. Eugenia, yours.
Lose Eugenia. There you are. I can't hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, she's here.
There she is.
Eugenia, you're still muted.
That's weird. I thought
There
Now we got you.
Okay, so for the period year-to-date September 30th, the operating fund 100 had revenues of $427,000 versus a budget of $396,000 for a favorable variance of $31,000. Total actual expenditures were $427,000 versus a budget of $484,000 for a favorable variance of $57,000. The actual operating deficit of $1,000 versus budget deficit of $88,000 resulted in a favorable variance of $87,000.
Okay. Any questions? None? All in favor, approving?
Aye.
Unanimous. Going on to B. B2, approve Norwalk Redevelopment Agency statement of revenues and expenditures for operating fund 100 through October 31st, 2024. All yours, Eugenia.
Okay, so for the period year-to-date October, 31, the operating fund 100 had revenues of 573,000 versus a budget of 528,000 for a favorable variance of 45,000. Total operating expenditures were 590,000 versus a budget of 660,000, which resulted in a favorable variance of 70,000. The actual operating deficit of 17,000 versus a budget deficit of 133,000 resulted in a favorable variance of 116,000.
That's good. Questions, comments? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote on approving those statements. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. We'll move on to item number B3. Approve Norwalk Redevelopment Agency audited financial statements for fiscal year ended June 30th, 2024, to be presented by our auditor, Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, again. And yeah, this is the June 30, 24 year end for the Norwalk Redevelopment Agency. And just a couple of things before I get into the real details. You'll probably see here that we've got a few more reports because during this year, not only did the federal single audit regulations apply, since you have more than 1 million of expenditures, but the state single audit act also came into play since there are more than 300,000 of direct state expenditures. And so I think I've always pretty much started at the end when I've given you my report. I'll kind of do that again as a board member. I've always felt, I've been on boards myself, where I want to hear the good news first, really. So page 26 of the report, which is the schedule of findings and question costs on the federal side, and then pages 31 and 32, which are the last two pages, is the schedule of findings and question costs for the state financial assistance. You will see we're reporting in both cases there were no findings and no question costs. And yeah, I don't want anybody to ever take that for granted. You know, I always appreciate the fact that we get full cooperation from the staff, but audits are still very much a paper chase, even though a lot of it is paperless these days. And it's the testing we have to do. We do a sample of all the disbursements and the revenue side. And if there were things missing or things did not agree to what is being reported in the books and records, we would have to report on that in these statements. So that the good news is there is nothing that has to get reported. And you all know this is a public document, and it sits in the Connecticut OPM website for any interested party to look at. So that's very important, obviously. So that's kind of why I like to kind of lead with that. This again is our typical clean opinion. This is a governmental entity, unlike what we were talking about with Norwalk, which is a 501c3. So there's a certain amount of reporting and disclosures here because it's under governmental accounting standards that you don't find in the typical 501c3. I tried to analyze, the financial position this year. Typically in governmental audits, you have the 1 year presentation. But when I look at the statement of net position, which is on page 6 of the draft statements, compared to last year, there was really one major change. It was pretty much, I think, it was the collection of about $1 million on the note receivable. I think that's the Washington Village.
Excuse me, Mike, but it wasn't a collection.
Well, the reduction I meant to say.
Right, okay.
So it went from $1.6 million the year before down to $650,000. I think that's the major difference between last year's total assets of roughly 8.8 million and this year's 7.8. And then the statement of revenue, statement of activities, I should say. the difference there, if you look at other programs and city projects, which is that 500 fund, I think it's roughly the $3 million of Connecticut DECD money that came in, or the grants. You kind of agree with that, Eugenia?
I'm sorry, which page? I kind of
It's
lost
on
you.
page 7.
Oh, sorry.
It's
that-
in
okay.
the other programs and city projects, but the Connecticut State, if I got it in front of me
I
here.
see it, I see, it, yeah.
Yeah, if you go
That
to
makes-
page 30 this year,
Yeah.
which is the state grants, you'll see there's
Yes.
the 3 million of the community economic and the
Right.
Department of Economic and Community Development grants, and
Yeah.
then there was the brownfield area. That $3 million, which is in the Fund 500, is pretty much the increase this year of revenue compared to last year. I mean, there are some other minor things, I think, going back and forth, but from an analytical standpoint, we're, I think, able to kind of pinpoint it to that. The disclosures that start on page 10 and go through page 18, and I want to tell you, Eugenia looks at this with a fine-tooth comb, and I really do appreciate that. They are your financial statements. We kind of help you and assist you drafting them up, but I really appreciate her really looking at everything that's in there and communicating back to us if things don't make sense. So, but it's really pretty much a reflection of what you saw last year. There were no real major standards. On page 18, we kind of summarize what happened during the year. There were a couple of pronouncements, didn't really apply to you folks. And if you look at the future ones too, statement 101 through 104, I don't think there's really a whole lot there that's going to change anything from the agency's reporting. So, and again, from then on, it's all the required federal single audit reports and Connecticut single audit reports that are required that say a lot, but I think I summed it up for you in the beginning. There are no findings or question costs that have to be reported. So that is really, I think, the major thrust here. And any questions? You know, there's no Form 990 for governmental entities. I kind of didn't really mention it with the Norwalk, and I don't think you need to memorialize this in the minutes, but the Form 990 that gets filed with the Norwalk report, as that's in process, has been done already. So, but no Form 990 for governmental entities. So there's no tax return that goes along with this.
Well, we like the findings. Any questions? David, Mary? No? No comments? So I'll ask for a vote. Do we approve the redevelopment agency's audited financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2024? Yes? Unanimous. That was easy. Thank you, Michael. That was very good.
All right, and just to kind of complete the cycle here, so the report is technically due to Connecticut OPM by December 31st. Obviously, we'll comply with that, and then after we kind of give you the final copies and you kind of give us the thumbs up again that yeah, we're done. We're required as the auditor to upload a digital copy of that to the Connecticut OPM website. You no longer have to submit any hard copy. We got that changed. Our society, Connecticut Society of CPAs, we got it changed a couple of years ago. They always had this requirement that you had to send a hard copy to them. So just so you know, no longer do you have to do that, and the digital copy suffices that we upload.
That's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Do
Mike.
we
Thank you.
want to go into executive session to discuss anything in the audit or any? I don't see
You know, I
any.
will leave that up to the chair. Typically, the protocol is usually to have staff get off and we just chat for a couple of moments and, you know,
Okay.
that is something we probably should do.
All right.
Good night,
So-
everyone.
Good night. Are you anxious to leave?
We'll let you, we're gonna cancel we'll turn off the recording and we'll make you the host, John. If you could just keep track of, what time you guys leave executive session and let me know for the minutes.
Okay,